welcome on this lovely day. I'm sorry I have both COVID hair and helmet hair now, so it goes, but we'll deal with that. It's been an unusual year. We did, however, in this unusual year, want to have a gathering. I see you're all spread out a little bit. That's nice. Do your kind of gym class touch, keeping space, and welcome all to be here for this dedication of the Adams Street dedicated bikeway. Now I'm going to quote somebody. I'm going to quote somebody who over the weekend, I'm going to paraphrase her because she said I'm the first but not the last. So we're going to call this the first but not the last dedicated bikeway in Bloomington. So there are a lot of people who made this happen. You're going to hear from a couple more besides me, and I know they're going to want to share their views of how important this is. A lot of what a city does is try to help its people live well, build the infrastructure, do the basics, the quality of life that help people live well. And that includes the physical infrastructure, like how we get around. People come together in communities so we can be together, do a lot of things together. We need to get around together, and bike lanes are a big part of that. And this is a really exciting addition to our network. And many of you here are dedicated and have been dedicated to making this work. Now, if you're a city employee, I know we have several here. Mallory, thank you for arranging all of this. We thank you very much. Mallory, our bike czar, and Beth Rosenbarger, emeritus, I guess, kind of bike czar, pumped up. We appreciate that. Thank you, Beth. We have Scott, the head of planning and transportation, Neil, the head of engineering. We have Mike from streets, Zach from CBU. We have, who else? Han. We got Brent from Han, representing Han. We appreciate that. It takes a whole village to put this kind of thing together and take care of it. Now, I do want to note, thank you all for doing that. And Milestone, is anybody here from Milestone who built this thing? Well, we thank them too for building it. So I do want to note, you'll hear how important bike lanes are. I'm not going to go. Protected bike lanes are safer. They encourage more people to use biking than otherwise would. That's really important. But I just want to share with you some stats about what you, and you're going to hear very shortly from the President of City Council, Steve Owen, but what the Council and the administration have done since 2016. We have actually built or replaced 29 miles of bike ped infrastructure since 2016, including 12 miles of sidewalk, 10 miles of bike lanes, and 7 miles of multi-use paths. So this is adding to a 29-mile addition. So give it up for that. Come on, that's 29 miles. We're going to ride them today, so be ready. No. We have also added 4,000 linear feet of lane sidewalk through the sidewalk repair matching program with residents. And just a few weeks ago, or a couple months ago, the City Council appropriated $650,000 of Recover Forward money for this year to invest in the bike ped infrastructure. Bloomington Transit, Bloomington Transit is here. Did I mention? Yeah, Zach. Bloomington Transit, we're investing in 25 stops to upgrade those yet this year, and continuing to work on lots of different things. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to let President Volan come here and talk to you on behalf of council. He will adjust the microphone for himself as he arrives. But thank you all for being here in this strange 2020 COVID year. We know how much people are getting out and about, so I will look forward to being pushed up with your energy through the hill, to open this thing up. Thank you all for being here, and enjoy. President Volan, there you go. Showman,
This ought to do. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Should I speak louder? All right. So there's no question that without this thing I would have driven here today. No question. I am not your typical bike rider. For 16 years, I watched as council members Andy Ruff and Dave Rolla would compete over who would ride their bike to city council meetings more frequently. And by the way, Andy won that handily, but they both did more than me, and I lived closer to city council than most of them did. I'm not your typical bike rider. But on April 29th, during the first meeting of the 2021 budget cycle, fully 2/3 of City Council said that bike and pedestrian infrastructure was a priority for them in the coming budget. And I feel that Mayor Hamilton and his administration have risen to the occasion. It's not, they didn't have to be prompted at that time. They were already in the works of doing things like this. But I felt like I had to start living my values. If I really believed that bike and pedestrian infrastructure is important, I had to commit to it myself.
Yeah.
And so I bought this after the budget meeting. And since then, just last week, I rode over there to the academy to vote. And then I rode the Kleindorfers to try to find something that they didn't have. But at least I rode. And I went there first. And I wouldn't have done it. I mean, you know, I got to use this thing before I even realized that it hadn't been dedicated yet. The first thing I want to say is thank you for making it happen. Thank you. The second thing I'll say is, isn't it clear how useful this is and how useless the width of this road otherwise would have been? It's a perfect use case for this extra set of road, and we can stand to see this in many other places. 3rd Street downtown, Mayor Hamilton. Okay. 3rd Street downtown. Finally, I want to point out, this may seem like an unusual contraption to you, but the unusual thing isn't that it has 3 wheels. The thing that will no longer be unusual soon is the motor. That without the motor, I wouldn't be using it anywhere near as much. And that's why I want to say, don't hate scooters too much. They're important. And start looking for motors on more people's bicycles. That's going to be the difference between casual riding and using the entire city on a bike. So the separated spaces for bicycles and small motorized vehicles is really important. We need to be embracing any different kind of mobility, whatever it takes to get people out of their cars, and believing that the streets are for them as well as cars and car drivers. With that, I want to introduce my very oldest dear friend, and she's just old to me, my very dear friend, Amy Roche. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, good. I'm Amy Roche. I'm a longtime Bloomington resident, and I rode over here this morning from my home in McDowell Gardens neighborhood. Represent. First, I want to say thank you to Mallory Rickbile for inviting me to be a spokesperson this morning. Dad jokes are not just for dads anymore. And yeah, it's important to me to be a part of this event because it's a cause that's dear to my heart. I'm going to check my phone for my notes here. When I entered my young adulthood, I chose bicycle as my main mode of transportation. And I think the appeal was a lot in the freedom and the independence, the experience of fresh air and exercise. I loved that. It felt like being a 20-something and free. But if I'm honest, that wasn't the only reason. So it was also because when I was in driver's ed in high school, I really felt the awesome power and force that vehicles have. And their potential in their weight and their speed to do grave harm. And I don't want to be ominous about that. I think it's just important to remember that there's a big difference between multi-ton metal motorized vehicles and bicycles when we're talking about safety. And that is a very important reason to have a protected lane for bicycles and for pedestrians. So I didn't get my driver's license till I was 26. I did become a driver, and I became dependent on the speed and distance that cars provide as much as anybody else. But about 10 years ago, I started to assess for myself. I took inventory of what personal life changes I could make for mitigating climate change. And one of the really obvious choices was to get back on my bike. Hey, right on cue. And I did that, but you know what? As a 40-something, it did feel a little bit different than from when I was a 20-year-old. And I felt a little more isolated and a little more awkward in establishing myself as a commuter in my 40-something lifestyle. And what I did to help mitigate that was I formed a Facebook group called B-Town Year-Round Bicycle Commuters to help. Thanks, yeah. And it's grown to 238 people now, I just checked this morning, who contribute to a community of mutual support. It includes individuals, but also the local bike shops who are really incredibly supportive and adaptive to bike commuting needs. People from the Bloomington Community Bike Project, from City, you know, the people are posting all kinds of supportive classes and tips for riding in different kinds of weather and layering clothes and things like that. I invite you to join that group. And I think it's been really helpful, I know for me, in having a little more confidence in being a bike commuter. So I want to just touch on a couple of things that Mallory gave me, some stats, that this new bike lane helps to provide for families riding. As a preschool teacher, a career preschool teacher, I saw a lot of families who wanted to take their kids riding and just didn't feel like that was safe enough for them to do. So a protected lane, for the beginning of a network of protected lanes, as the mayor referenced, means that families would have the option of saving on average $5,000 to $7,000 per year that they're now spending on owning and maintaining and fueling a vehicle. And it means our public spaces can be dedicated more to humans rather than making space for our cars. It means more people have access to commutes that make them happier and increase physical activity rather than being stressed behind the wheel and simply trying to get from one place to the next as fast as possible. And, as I mentioned earlier, it means that we would be closer to our goals of reducing carbon emissions. So I think this is a great day for the city of Bloomington, and I thank you all.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all. So we are going to form a bike peloton and ride up the slightly up the hill in order to cut the ribbon. So ribbon cutters, if you wouldn't mind getting it into position, and then those who have brought their bike today, feel free to just pull around and we'll cut through the ribbon in just a few seconds. And if you drove here, you walked here, make sure you spread out on the sidewalk so that we can get as many enthusiastic people in the picture as possible. All right.